But the coercion piece is somebody mentioned about, people wanting their career to blow up or whatever. That's coercion. I mean, it's different modes of coercion, and whether or not, you shouldn't make that choice.
He could turn around and say, I didn't make any money, I gave you money. That's what one mock juror argued in Diddy's defense during the explosive TMZ documentary that simulated his upcoming trial. But was this enough to save him? Despite passionate debates about consent, power, and racial motivations, the mock jury ultimately hammered Diddy with a brutal 10-2 guilty verdict on sex trafficking charges. The documentary revealed the racketeering charge ended in a deadlocked 6-6 split, showing exactly why prosecutors might be sweating bullets about their chances in May. What evidence pushed these strangers to condemn one of music's biggest moguls? Was Diddy running a criminal enterprise or just living the mogul lifestyle? That's the question that tore this mock jury apart when they faced the complex racketeering charge against him. The explosive documentary, The Downfall of Diddy, His Defense, gives us an unprecedented look into a jury room where tensions flared over what really constitutes a criminal enterprise. The mock jury found themselves wrestling with the legal definition of racketeering. It's not just about bad behavior, but proving someone ran an organized criminal operation for profit. One juror, visibly frustrated during deliberations, argued what could become Diddy's strongest defense. I didn't make any money. I gave you money. This simple but powerful statement challenged the very foundation of the prosecution's case. Other jurors weren't buying it. If company money paid for these freak-offs, that's using business resources for potentially illegal activities, countered a female juror, referring to the alleged sex parties at the center of the case. The documentary showed heated exchanges as jurors debated whether Diddy's infamous parties were personal indulgences or calculated business moves. The deliberation room practically caught fire when jurors started arguing about what actually counts as profit. In Diddy's world, his brand is his business. Everything he does builds his image, insisted one juror, suggesting that even if no direct cash changed hands, these activities boosted Diddy's empire. Another juror pointed out how easy it would be for someone with Diddy's resources to disguise party expenses as marketing costs or talent relations in company books. You could feel the frustration mounting as jurors demanded more financial evidence. Where are the receipts? One older juror kept asking, highlighting the challenge prosecutors will face in connecting the dots between Diddy's alleged activities and his business operations. Several jurors worried the prosecution hadn't clearly shown how the money flowed through his empire to support these activities. After hours of heated debate, the jury reached a stunning deadlock split perfectly down the middle, with 6 voting guilty and 6 voting not guilty on the racketeering charge. This even split reveals the uphill battle real prosecutors will face when Diddy's trial begins this May. Without stronger financial evidence linking his alleged crimes directly to his business operations, securing a unanimous verdict might be nearly impossible. While the financial dealings left the jury deadlocked, it was the allegations of sex trafficking that truly transformed the deliberation room. The invisible power wielded by a music industry titan became the focal point that would ultimately devastate Diddy's defense. The mock jury carefully examined the legal definition of sex trafficking: the recruitment, transportation, or soliciting of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act, induced by force, fraud, or coercion. This seemingly straightforward definition sparked intense debate about what really constitutes coercion when dealing with someone who controls career destinies. Flight records emerged as damning evidence against Diddy. Jurors pored over documentation showing he had flown numerous women to his infamous parties across the country. While the transportation element was easily established, the question of coercion proved more complex and divisive. How can these women claim they were forced when they willingly got on private jets? One skeptical juror questioned. Adults make their own choices. Nobody held a gun to their heads. This sentiment initially resonated with several jurors who struggled to see beyond traditional notions of force and intimidation. But as deliberations intensified, the conversation shifted dramatically toward the invisible chains of power and influence. A female juror delivered what became the deliberation's most profound moment when she compared Diddy's relationships to patterns seen in domestic abuse. Look at how many abusive relationships there are and how long those women stay. Like it can be up to over 20 years, she explained passionately. And imagine it being the most powerful person there is in the rap career. I would stay for that long too. This powerful analogy cracked open the discussion about consent in profoundly unequal power dynamics. Jurors began to reconsider what coercion truly means when someone can make or break careers with a single phone call. Does accepting an invitation from someone who could destroy your dreams constitute true consent? The majority increasingly believed it didn't. Some jurors remained unconvinced, questioning whether prosecutors could definitively prove the commercial sex element. Maybe these women genuinely liked him, one holdout suggested. We can't assume every relationship involving a powerful man is automatically exploitative, but as the hours passed, the majority position crystallized around a fundamental question. Can true consent exist when one party holds overwhelming power over the other's future? For most jurors, the answer became increasingly clear no. When the final votes were tallied, the result was devastating for Diddy's defense. 10 jurors found him guilty of sex trafficking charges, with only 2 holdouts maintaining reasonable doubt. This near-unanimous verdict on the trafficking charge stands in stark contrast to the deadlocked racketeering deliberation, suggesting prosecutors might strategically focus their efforts on the trafficking elements when the real trial begins. The hotel surveillance footage might have sealed Diddy's fate before the jury even entered the deliberation room. This 19-second clip showing the music mogul violently assaulting Cassie Ventura in a hotel hallway operated like a silent witness, challenging every denial his defense team had carefully constructed. While jurors technically debated legal definitions of trafficking and coercion, this undeniable visual evidence became the elephant in the room that nobody could ignore. The documentary exposed how deeply this video affected the mock jury's perception. When asked directly about its impact, most jurors openly admitted they couldn't separate what they'd seen from the charges at hand. One juror confessed that witnessing Diddy kick and drag Cassie through the hallway dramatically undermined his credibility when denying other allegations. The visceral nature of the violence created a domino effect, toppling his carefully constructed image as the jury questioned. If he lied about this, what else was he hiding? Defense attorneys fought desperately to compartmentalize this evidence, arguing that a single incident shouldn't define Diddy's character or establish guilt for unrelated charges. They pushed jurors to consider each allegation independently, emphasizing that past behavior doesn't automatically prove current crimes. But this strategy faced an uphill battle against human psychology. As the documentary revealed, once jurors had witnessed such disturbing behavior, they found it nearly impossible to unsee it. Several jurors articulated how the video established what they perceived as a clear pattern of control and violence that directly supported the trafficking accusations. The brutal footage transformed vague allegations into concrete possibilities in their minds. Suddenly, claims about coercion and power dynamics weren't just abstract concepts, but plausible extensions of behavior they'd witnessed with their own eyes. The video effectively bridged the gap between reasonable doubt and probable guilt. The documentary highlighted this cognitive challenge. Jurors struggled to separate their emotional reactions to the video from their logical assessment of the current charges. Some attempted to maintain strict compartmentalization, arguing that separate incidents required separate judgment. Yet even these jurors appeared visibly affected by what they'd seen, their body language betraying internal conflict despite their verbal assertions. What emerged from the deliberation room was a sobering truth. This single piece of evidence functioned as the tipping point for most mock jurors. While they debated legal technicalities and definitions, the brutal reality captured on hotel security cameras had already convinced them Diddy was capable of the crimes he stood accused of. The video didn't just damage his defense, it fundamentally altered how jurors processed every subsequent piece of evidence and argument. With the hotel footage staining the jury's perception, Mark Agnifilo made a stunning pivot in Diddy's defense strategy. This is an attempted takedown of a successful black man, he declared in the documentary, instantly transforming the deliberation room from a space of evidence assessment to one deeply entangled with America's complicated racial history. The strategy wasn't subtle. It was a deliberate effort to inject reasonable doubt by connecting Diddy's case to historical patterns of targeting successful minorities in the justice system. The reaction among jurors was immediate and fractured along unexpected lines. The documentary captured the visible discomfort as jurors shifted in their seats, exchanged glances, and struggled to address the elephant that had suddenly materialized in the room. What had been a discussion about evidence now became a conversation about racial bias and systemic injustice. For some black jurors, Agnifilo's argument struck a personal chord. While acknowledging the mountain of evidence against Diddy, they couldn't ignore America's troubling history of targeting prominent black figures. One juror's confession revealed the excruciating internal conflict. Despite believing Diddy likely committed the crimes, they admitted struggling with the idea of sending another black man to prison. This emotional admission laid bare how America's racial history can weigh on jurors beyond the evidence presented. Other members of the mock jury weren't having it. Several jurors, both black and white, rejected the racial motivation argument entirely, viewing it as a desperate last-ditch effort to distract from the damning evidence they'd reviewed. He's not being targeted because he's black, one juror insisted firmly. He's being investigated because there's evidence of criminal activity. The room's tension was palpable as jurors debated whether acknowledging historical injustice required them to ignore contemporary evidence. The strategy deployed by Diddy's team mirrors tactics that have influenced high-stakes celebrity trials throughout American history. The documentary drew direct parallels to the O.J. Simpson trial, where similar arguments about racial bias in law enforcement created enough reasonable doubt to secure an acquittal despite substantial physical evidence. Like the Simpson case, Diddy's defense doesn't need to convince all jurors, just enough to prevent a unanimous verdict. The mock jury's reaction revealed why this approach could prove effective. Even after reviewing extensive evidence and witnessing the hotel surveillance footage, the racial defense created meaningful pause for some jurors. The prosecutorial team watching the mock deliberations appeared visibly concerned, as they realized their challenge wasn't just proving guilt beyond reasonable doubt, but overcoming deeply embedded historical contexts that some jurors bring into the courtroom. As Diddy's real-world legal saga marches toward May 5th, the mock jury's verdict casts an ominous shadow over his future. With jury selection beginning next month, the prosecution faces a precarious balancing act. The split decision on racketeering charges hints at potential weaknesses. In the government's case, jurors struggled with defining whether Diddy profited from alleged criminal activity, a critical element that prosecutors must prove beyond reasonable doubt. Legal experts are now weighing in, suggesting the path to conviction isn't guaranteed. The prosecution's case hinges on convincing 12 complete strangers that one of hip-hop's most powerful figures built his empire through exploitation and fear. Those mock jurors, everyday people, just like the ones who'll decide Diddy's fate, revealed the complex dynamics that could unfold in the actual courtroom. When the real jurors take their seats next month, they'll be thrust into the same tangle of evidence, allegations, and emotional testimony that left our mock jury deeply divided. The music mogul's freedom hangs in the balance. With decades in federal prison awaiting if convicted, the countdown to Judgment Day has begun.